The casket hadn't even been lowered into the ground when my sister Emma strode to the podium, clutching our mother's will in her trembling hands. "Before we say goodbye to Mom," she announced to the stunned mourners, "there's something everyone needs to know." Her eyes locked with mine across the rows of black-clad relatives. Tyler isn't Sarah's son. He never was. And Mom made sure the truth wouldn't die with her. My 15-year-old son, the child I'd raised since birth, turned to me with confusion etching his features. "Mom?" he whispered, but the word suddenly felt like a knife between my ribs. I couldn't breathe as Emma continued reading from our mother's final testament, revealing the elaborate deception that had shaped my entire adult life. The secret my mother had taken to her grave was now being broadcast to everyone I knew, while the dirt waited to cover her coffin and my world collapsed around me. What I didn't know then was that this public humiliation was just the beginning. The real shock would come when I discovered why they had all lied to me for 15 years and what I would do about it. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, our family appeared picture-perfect to outsiders. My father, a successful attorney. My mother, the quintessential homemaker who volunteered for every PTA committee. And my older sister Emma, the golden child who collected achievements like trophies. Then there was me, Sarah, the afterthought, the backup plan, the perpetual disappointment. My mother made no secret of her preference. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. When Emma brought home straight A's, my B+ in the same subject was met with a dismissive sigh. When Emma was crowned prom queen, my mother spent 3 hours taking photos. When I didn't attend my prom, she barely noticed. The pattern was established early. Emma succeeded, I existed. During my 16th birthday dinner, my mother presented Emma with a surprise gift, her grandmother's diamond earrings, because Emma had just been accepted to Yale. "You'll get something special when you accomplish something worth celebrating," my mother told me when she caught me crying in the bathroom later. I never did receive those promised earrings. By the time I reached my late 20s, I'd built a life deliberately separate from my family. I moved to Boston, became an elementary school teacher, and limited home visits to major holidays. Then came the phone call that changed everything. I was pregnant. The father was a brief relationship that had already ended, and he wanted nothing to do with the baby. Despite my mother's thinly veiled disapproval of my situation, I was ecstatic. Finally, someone who would be mine, who would love me unconditionally. The pregnancy was difficult. Severe complications led to extended hospital stays during my 3rd trimester. Emma, surprisingly, became my advocate, shuttling between Boston and Connecticut, managing my medical care while I drifted in and out of consciousness. When I finally delivered Tyler via emergency C-section, I was too weak to hold him immediately. The doctor said it was a miracle we both survived. What no one mentioned, what I wouldn't discover until 15 years later at my mother's funeral, was that I hadn't delivered Tyler at all. During those weeks when I was heavily sedated, my sister had orchestrated the greatest deception imaginable. My own baby had died shortly after birth, a fact they concealed from me. The boy I raised as my son was actually Emma's child, conceived during an affair with her married professor. Our mother, desperate to avoid scandal that might damage Emma's budding law career, had concocted the elaborate switch. The grand gesture I had planned for my mother's funeral was a heartfelt eulogy about forgiveness and second chances. how despite our strained relationship, she had supported me when I needed her most during Tyler's birth. I'd even brought the only gift she ever gave me, a silver locket containing Tyler's first baby picture. I planned to place it in her casket as a symbol of the peace I thought we'd made. If only I had known that the baby in that locket wasn't mine at all, and that the entire foundation of our reconciliation was built on the most devastating lie imaginable. My mother's decline was swift and merciless. Pancreatic cancer discovered at stage 4. Within 3 months of diagnosis, we were planning her funeral. Emma took charge of the arrangements, naturally. As executrix of the will, she insisted on handling everything, from selecting the casket to coordinating with the funeral home. "You've got Tyler to worry about," she told me. "Focus on him." I spent those final weeks driving Tyler from Boston to Connecticut every weekend so he could say goodbye to his grandmother. During one of those visits, I overheard my mother and Emma arguing behind the closed door of the master bedroom. "You promised you'd never tell her," my mother hissed. "That was before Tyler started asking questions," Emma replied. "He deserves to know his medical history at least." "It would destroy her. Is that what you want?" "What I want is irrelevant now. You're dying, Mom. We can't keep pretending forever." When I asked them what they were discussing, they claimed it was about some family heirlooms. I believed them because I wanted to, because the alternative was unthinkable. The morning of the funeral dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect fall day my mother would have appreciated. Tyler looked uncomfortable in his new suit, tugging at his collar as we drove to the church. "Why is Aunt Emma acting so weird?" he asked. "She keeps looking at me like I'm going to break or something." "Everyone grieves differently," I told him, though I'd noticed it too. The way Emma hovered near Tyler, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. At the church, Emma orchestrated the seating arrangements, placing Tyler between herself and her husband, separating him from me. When I tried to switch places, she whispered sharply, "Mom wanted it this way." I relented, assuming it was some final maternal power play from beyond the grave. The service proceeded according to my mother's meticulously planned instructions. Various community members spoke about her charitable work. My father, stoic and distant as always, delivered a brief remembrance devoid of any real emotion. Then Emma announced there would be a special reading from our mother's personal papers before we proceeded to the graveside service. My sister pulled a sealed envelope from her purse. "Our mother left instructions that this be read today in front of everyone." Her voice wavered. "She needed certain truths to be acknowledged." An uneasy murmur rippled through the congregation. My father's face drained of color. "Emma," he warned, "this isn't the place." "It's exactly the place," she insisted. "It's what Mom wanted." As Emma broke the seal on the envelope, I felt a sudden, overwhelming dread. Tyler reached across the pew and grabbed my hand, an instinctive gesture of comfort that would soon become unbearably ironic. Emma cleared her throat and began reading. "To my family and friends gathered here today, I leave this world with one great regret, that I allowed a lie to persist for 15 years. The church fell silent. Every eye turned toward Emma, then shifted to me. 15 years ago, Emma continued, her voice growing stronger, my daughters faced 2 very different crises. Sarah experienced severe complications during childbirth. Her baby, my grandson, did not survive." The words hit me like physical blows. I clutched the pew in front of me, certain I had misheard. Simultaneously, Emma read, my daughter Emma found herself pregnant under circumstances that would have destroyed her future. In my misguided attempt to protect both my daughters, I made a decision that I believed was for the greater good. The realization began to dawn on me, horror spreading through my body like ice water. The boy known as Tyler Mitchell is not Sarah's biological son. He is Emma's child, given to Sarah to raise when she was too ill to understand what was happening. Gasps erupted throughout the church. Someone dropped a hymnal. My father buried his face in his hands. Tyler's grip on my hand loosened. He stared at me, then at Emma, his face a mask of confusion and betrayal. "Mom?" he whispered, but I couldn't tell if he was addressing me or the woman who had just been revealed as his biological mother. I stood up on legs that threatened to buckle beneath me. The room tilted dangerously. Through the roaring in my ears, I heard Emma continue reading, something about trust funds and inheritance rights and DNA tests that confirmed everything. My mother's final act wasn't just to reveal the truth. It was to ensure that the custody of my son, no, not my son, would be legally transferred to his rightful mother upon her death. In that moment, standing in the church with hundreds of eyes witnessing my humiliation, I realized that my mother's cruelty extended beyond the grave. She hadn't just taken my child, she had orchestrated a public spectacle of my loss. "Stop!" My voice cut through the murmurs that filled the church. Emma paused mid-sentence, the will still clutched in her manicured hands. "You don't get to do this. Not here. Not like this." I walked toward the podium, my heels echoing against the marble floor. The faces around me blurred. Neighbors, family friends, distant relatives, all witnesses to this grotesque theater my mother had scripted from her deathbed. "For 15 years, I said, reaching the altar where my mother's casket sat adorned with lilies, I have been the one who sat up with Tyler when he had nightmares. I was the one who taught him to read, who cheered of his baseball games, who held him when his heart was broken for the first time." Emma stepped back, her expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Sarah, Mom wanted—" "I don't care what she wanted," I snapped. "She lost that right the moment she decided to steal my child and give him to me as some sort of consolation prize." I turned to face the congregation, no longer caring about the tears streaming down my face. My mother and sister let me believe that the most precious person in my life was my biological child. They watched me celebrate his birthdays, his achievements, his growth, all while knowing they had constructed an elaborate lie. My father stood up, his face ashen. "Sarah, please, this isn't the time." "When is the time, Dad? After the reception? Next week? 15 years from now?" I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the vaulted ceiling. "Were you part of this too? Did everyone know except me?" His silence was answer enough. I looked directly at Tyler, who sat frozen in the front pew, his 15-year-old face contorted with confusion and pain. "Tyler, I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. You have been my son in every way that matters. Nothing in that will change that." Emma stepped forward. "Sarah, you don't understand. I was 23, in law school. The father was my married professor. It would have ruined everything. Mom thought—" "I know exactly what Mom thought," I cut her off, "that I was the expendable daughter. That my life, my truth, didn't matter as long as the golden child was protected." I turned back to the casket. Well, congratulations, Mother. Your plan worked perfectly. Emma got her perfect life, and I got to be the unknowing surrogate. I reached into my purse and pulled out the silver locket, the one containing what I'd thought was Tyler's first baby picture. I held it up for everyone to see. I was going to place this in her casket as a symbol of forgiveness, but now I understand there's nothing to forgive because there was never any reconciliation. There was only manipulation until the very end. I dropped the locket on top of the casket with a metallic clatter. The irony is, Mom, that you never needed to lie. If you had asked me to raise Emma's baby because she couldn't, I would have done it. I would have done it out of love, not because of a deception. I stepped down from the altar and walked to Tyler. Kneeling before him, I took his trembling hands in mine. I don't know what happens next, I told him softly, but I am still your mom if you want me to be. Biology doesn't make a parent, love does. Tyler's eyes, so familiar yet suddenly strange, filled with tears. Did you really not know? Not until today, I whispered. Every moment we've shared has been real for me. I stood and addressed the stunned congregation one final time. My mother's final act was meant to humiliate me while reclaiming her precious grandchild for her precious daughter. But she miscalculated, because Tyler isn't a possession to be handed back and forth according to a will. He's a person who deserves better than all of us. With that, I walked down the aisle and out of the church, leaving behind my mother's body, her will, and the shattered remains of the family she had twisted beyond recognition. As the heavy doors closed behind me, I heard Tyler call out, "Mom, wait!" I couldn't tell if he was calling for me or for Emma. I spent that night in a hotel room, my phone buzzing incessantly with messages from shocked funeral guests and reporters who had somehow caught wind of the dramatic scene. The local Connecticut paper's society columnist, who had covered my mother's charity events for decades, was particularly persistent. By morning, I imagined our family's implosion would be headline news in our hometown. Around midnight, a soft knock at my door startled me. I opened it to find my father standing there, looking every one of his 70 years. "She made us promise," he said without preamble, sinking into the room's only chair. "When your baby died and Emma needed somewhere for hers to go, your mother saw it as providence." "Providence?" I echoed hollowly. "My child died." "You were in and out of consciousness for weeks after the C-section. The doctors weren't sure you'd survive the infection that followed. Your mother thought, we all thought, that giving you Emma's baby would give you something to live for. So you let me believe he was mine for 15 years? He nodded, unable to meet my eyes. The longer it went on, the harder it became to tell the truth. Then, when your mother got sick, Emma wanted to come clean. Your mother refused, said it would be like losing you all over again. So she waited until she was safely dead to drop the bomb? I laughed bitterly. Typical. "There's more," my father said, pulling a sealed envelope from his pocket. "Your mother left this with her lawyer. Instructions that it be given to you if Emma actually went through with the reading." Inside was a key to a storage unit and an address. My father didn't know what it contained. He had merely been instructed to deliver it. The next morning, I drove to the storage facility on the outskirts of town. The small unit contained a single plastic tub, meticulously labeled in my mother's handwriting, "Sarah, 2010. Inside were items I'd never seen before: a tiny crocheted blanket, a hospital bracelet, a lock of dark hair, and a single photograph of a newborn, my actual son, who had lived for only a few hours before a congenital heart defect claimed his life. There was also a journal, my mother's private account of those terrible weeks. Reading it, I learned that my son, my biological son, had been named Nathan, chosen by my mother when I was too ill to do so myself. I learned that Emma had given birth 2 weeks after me to a healthy boy she named Daniel, who immediately became Tyler in the elaborate fiction they constructed. I learned that my mother had genuinely believed she was saving both her daughters, giving me a reason to recover and giving Emma freedom from scandal. What struck me most was the clinical detachment with which she documented the deception. Each entry focused on practical matters, how they obtained a birth certificate, how they kept hospital staff from revealing the truth, how they managed the logistics of the switch. Nowhere did she acknowledge the profound violation or consider what would happen when the truth eventually emerged. I was still sitting on the cold concrete floor of the storage unit when my phone rang. It was Tyler. "Can I see you?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. We met at a diner halfway between the storage unit and my mother's house, where he had apparently spent the night with Emma. He slid into the booth across from me, a teenager carrying the weight of adult deceptions. Emma, he stumbled over the words. She showed me pictures of her when she was pregnant and of her with me when I was born. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "But they sent me home with you," he continued, "and you're the one who's been my mom." "The only mom I've ever known." "Yes," I whispered. "So what happens now?" he asked, vulnerability radiating from him. "The will says I'm supposed to live with her." "What do you want?" I asked, realizing it was the first time anyone had bothered to consider his desires in this entire sordid mess. "I want things to go back to normal," he said, tears spilling down his cheeks. "But I don't even know what normal is anymore." Over the next 2 weeks, as the dust began to settle, Tyler decided he wanted to continue living with me in Boston. Emma, surprisingly, didn't fight it. The DNA test results confirmed what we already knew, but as my lawyer pointed out, I had 15 years of established custody and could make a compelling case for maintaining it, regardless of my mother's posthumous wishes. "I made the same mistake Mom did," Emma told me during an uneasy truce meeting. "I thought I could control everything with legal documents and careful planning, but he sees you as his mother. Fighting that would only cause more damage." Instead, we established a new arrangement. Tyler would spend school years with me in Boston, where his friends and life remained. Holidays and summers would include time with Emma, who could now openly develop a relationship with him as his biological mother. It wasn't perfect, but it centered Tyler's needs rather than adult agendas. The silver locket I'd abandoned on my mother's casket was returned to me by the funeral director. I considered discarding it, but instead I placed inside it the single photograph of Nathan, my biological son, alongside the one of Tyler as a newborn. 2 children, one I'd never had the chance to know, and one I'd raised without knowing the truth. Both, in different ways, my sons. 6 months after the funeral, I used part of my inheritance. My mother had, perhaps out of guilt, left her estate equally divided between Emma and me to establish a foundation supporting parents who had lost infants. I named it after Nathan, the child I had grieved without knowing. Tyler, showing wisdom beyond his years, began calling Emma by her first name rather than Aunt, but still called me Mom. When people asked about our complicated family situation, he developed a simple explanation. I have two mothers. One gave birth to me, and one raised me. I'm lucky that way. And I discovered something unexpected in the aftermath of my mother's final betrayal: freedom. The constant need to earn her approval, to measure up to Emma's achievements, had shaped my choices in ways I hadn't fully recognized. Now, released from those expectations, I began to rebuild my life on my own terms. The grand gesture I had planned for my mother's funeral, placing the locket in her casket as a symbol of forgiveness, had been based on a false premise. But in its place emerged something more authentic: the understanding that family isn't defined by biology or legal documents or even shared history. It's created daily, through choice, through showing up, through love that persists even when the foundations beneath it shift. Looking back now, 2 years after that funeral that changed everything, I realized that the truth, however painfully delivered, was ultimately a gift. My relationship with Tyler has deepened through honesty. My relationship with Emma, while still complicated, has evolved into something resembling actual sisterhood rather than competition. And my relationship with myself has transformed completely. I no longer define myself through my mother's critical lens or measure my worth against Emma's accomplishments. Instead, I've learned that family isn't always what we're born into. Sometimes it's what we build from the broken pieces we're handed. Tyler, now 17, recently told me something that crystallized everything. "Mom, I'm glad I know the truth, but it doesn't change who we are to each other." In that moment, I knew we would be okay. If you're facing your own family secrets or painful revelations, remember this: the truth may break you open, but it also creates space for something more authentic to grow. And sometimes, what seems like an ending is actually the beginning of a story you never knew you needed to tell. If you found value in my story, please subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and redemption. And share your own experiences in the comments below, because knowing we're not alone in our struggles is sometimes all the comfort we need.